Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another ARPneuro Q&A. My name is Jake. I'm your ARPneuro trainer, and with us is, as always, is Matt Dell. Matt, it's good to have you with us again. Long time no see. We were at the MLB, and now here we are doing a Q&A.
You gotta love it. You're spending a lot of time with me, Jake. You're probably sick of me for sure.
You know, this is a good distance because, I could see in the camera, but I still love you.
It's not 48 straight hours in the car and at a trade show with me.
No, that was fine. It was a really good time. I didn't know what to expect, to be honest. And the trainers were super open. I expect great things from it. We're going to have more baseball teams coming soon. I cannot wait.
Yep.
We have quite a few now as we start. It was nice to get a really warm reception. I felt like we had a warm reception.
Absolutely. I think the most exciting part was their intent to learn more of the protocols for all the different conditions. I thought that was the most exciting piece of it. But
same.
I think the only blunder that we had is having a few guys that are in the MLB and to find out from the teams that, oh yeah, he's no longer with the Twins. He's been traded to the Mariners and things of that nature, but whatever.
It was kind of funny, but there was no way we could have been privy to that information.
Not a chance, but that's the winter meetings for you. But let's jump right in. I want to give everybody just kind of an overview. If you're not familiar with ARPneuro, I just want to kind of give you a little bit background. Technology's been around for 20 plus years, really prevalent in the professional sports. Now we're trying to bring that to weekend warriors and just really anybody for either faster recovery or just injury prevention. As I mentioned, kind of all over the major sporting leagues, colleges, and we're just getting more and more success and having so much more success just educating not only the teams and players, but with all the different protocols and just making sure that they take full advantage of this powerful technology.
And I have a feeling there's going to be some more baseball teams below. Very shortly.
Without question, no doubt. So we have two products. We have the RX100, which is a class 2 medical device. And I think our guest tonight is going to be talking a little bit about how she's integrated both the RX100 into her clinic and practice, as well as the PRS, which is the over-the-counter, very simple, easy to use, same exact technology. Really, the only difference is the RX can contract up to 500 contractions per second, and the PRS can go up to 245 contractions per second.
And proven once again in travel, the PRS was absolutely awesome. I was delayed for quite some time. I did use the PRS, and that helped out a lot. So just keep that in mind, those of you who travel a lot.
Yes, for sure. Yeah, here's an example of one pro athlete who played phenomenal again last night. I think they played last night, right? Or was it yesterday afternoon?
Yep, it was last night.
Yep. Okay. Rough one, but
phenomenal is a rough word after that game. But I know what you meant.
He played good. He played good.
He did play. He played really well.
Anyways, this article here was about him playing all last year through the playoffs and the Super Bowl with a torn groin muscle, and he attributed his ability to kind of get through the playoffs and play because of the RX100 and the ARP technology. That's him. I think that was earlier this year, right? About 3 games into the season, he uses the PRS. If you can see it there, it's kind of small, but he uses it pregame to prepare and get ready as well. So,
correct.
Oh, by the way, go back one.
Yeah, absolutely.
Let's give a plug out to Lane Johnson. He is up for Walter Payton Man of the Year for the Eagles.
Right. Yes, he is.
Matt. So for all those out there listening, let's go to, I think it's NFL.com, I'm assuming, and there's a way to vote. Yeah,
I got to vote.
Exactly. Get out and vote. I love it.
I love it.
Like Chicago, I think you're allowed to vote twice. So,
well, I'm gonna have some of my passed away people and late great grandmothers vote as well.
I love it. Good stuff. Well, a lot of people say, hey, how does this compare to a TENS unit? And it's really not comparable. So Jake, I don't know if you want to dive in and just kind of talk a little bit about high level, how the differences are.
Sure. The obvious ones that you can see is certainly the contraction speed. Alternating current on any type of TENS unit especially, you're just not going to see 245 times per second on a take-home unit. And again, with our class 2 medical device at 500 times per second, that has a lot to do with the way the direct wave, our current is actually designed, where we can get to those type of speeds. But even more important than that is the ability to be able to contract a muscle the same way your brain is able to do it. So it's a harmonious wave, which is why it's so successful in movement side. You could try to do movement with a TENS unit, but it's all going to be physiological. It's not going to get to that neurological base like ours can and help to re-educate muscles. So it's definitely a game changer, but you really, when we say this a lot, you have to feel the wave to really see the difference. The moment you feel it, you're going to know right away.
Wow. First of all, let me say, we just got a thumbs up. Second of all, probably the best description you've had so far on the comparison. So
no kidding.
You're on your A game tonight, my friend.
I guess so. It's the early wake ups.
I love it. Good stuff. Anyway, so this technology, we've been working pretty extensively with Logan University and Kaiser University to help do studies, and they've been instrumental in helping with protocols, and I think you're going to start seeing more and more of this technology as they're graduating DCs into practices. And very, very exciting. Jake, I know you do quite a bit with Kaiser and some of that. So,
yeah, I'm super excited about the studies that come out of it, and the research is a game changer. It has been over the course of the last 6 months, and it's just something that I think that is our commodity. It really is something that we always turn to now, and we definitely have an edge over a lot of others because of that. Dave, I see your question. Will Cari be speaking soon? Yes, she will. We will.
Okay.
We will.
They're already trying to
get us off the stage so we can get.
I love it. I was actually going to see if Sarah's watching and say, where can they find those studies on our website? But as she's putting that on the screen there, look at that.
So quick.
The science.
She was ready for it.
I thought she might be eating dinner, but obviously not. So we've got basically the technology is neurological. It helps alleviate pain, prevent injury, accelerate the natural healing of soft tissue, increase range of motion, and really helps muscle conditioning and re-education. So I won't go into more. Very good with so many different conditions. Our goal is to educate and to make sure that whether you're a clinic or individual owner of the PRS, we want to make sure that you have access to all the different protocols. And so these Q&As are really an intent to try to educate, find out how other people are taking advantage of the technology. And if you have any questions at any time, you can always text us at info@ARPneuro.com.
Beautiful. I love it. Let's get to the star of the show. What do you think?
I love it.
All right. So our guest is Cari. She is a co-owner of Peak Performance Physical Therapy. As a graduate of Emory University with a master's in physical therapy, Cari's journey led her to California, where she made a lasting impact at Scripps Green Hospital, fostering connections with physicians and the athletic community. She has traversed the globe working with professional athletes in various sports. Cari established Peak Performance Physical Therapy in Encinitas, California.
I think it's Ensenada.
I messed it up. Yeah, like enchilada. Right. I should have known. A clinic dedicated to personalized rehabilitation and injury prevention. Cari's extensive knowledge and years of experience uniquely positioned her to develop individualized treatment plans, empowering the community to reach her peak physical potential. Join us now for an enlightening conversation with Cari as we explore the transformative intersection of physical therapy and performance enhancement. Cari, thank you for dealing with all of that. And it's great to see you. And thanks for being here today.
Thanks for having us. And it's Encinitas, by the way.
Encinitas. Thank you.
Okay, man.
Well, and the clinic's now in Solana Beach, which is just another beach down.
Okay, good. I love Solana Beach.
Yeah.
I know where that is. Yeah, and Jake, I'm so glad you had to read that because there were some big words in that. So,
I only stumbled over like 6 of them, so that's pretty good for me.
I would definitely butcher. Well, welcome. First of all, thanks for taking the time out to talk to us and answer some questions. First of all, so you're in California. How long have you been there? In California?
I've been here since PT school, so like over 20 years now.
Okay, good. And tell us a little bit about your practice and what you do there in California.
So my practice started as a pretty small boutique practice. I specialized working with student athletes, and I had traveled with some professional snowboarders and surfers and things like that before I was married and had kids. And when I settled down, I started seeing all the local athletes and ended up somehow getting involved really with the high school athletes, and trickled down into youth athletes, and my kids were athletes, and then that kind of grew that whole thing. So I work with a very active population. I wouldn't say it's just athletes, but they're active individuals. I work with 9-year-olds to 80-year-olds, but they all still want to be surfing and riding their bikes and golfing and doing everything. So my job is to make sure that they can do what they want to do, and I don't ever really have to say no to them.
That's great. Well, tell me a little bit about how and when did you discover ARPneuro and the technology of ARP?
I'd say like ARP was probably first introduced to me maybe around 2020, maybe a little bit before that, maybe 2019. Somebody walked into my clinic with it and was kind of telling me about it, and it sounded too good to be true. And he was very persistent and kept bringing it around. And he recommended I just bring in some of the kids that I work on and let them try it and see what they thought. And that was the selling point. Like as soon as we put it on a host of actually high school baseball players, and some ACL patients, soccer players, every single one of them fell in love with it and wanted to know when I was getting it and when I was going to have it and when they could use it.
Well, that's a great sales pitch when you get your patients to say, yes, I'm feeling the results and I can feel the difference. That's
that's really what sold it to me. I'm honestly have never been a fan of modalities. I never even had a modality in my clinic until I put the ARP in there, to be honest.
Okay.
Oh, yeah. I never had it just wasn't like something I used and believed heavily in. And personally, the electrical modalities never felt comfortable to me.
Yeah.
So it took a little bit for me to use the ARP. And then once I used it, I kind of fell in love with it too. It becomes addicting and you really like using it because you just feel better and move better.
That's great. So tell us some of the, I love hearing the great success stories. So tell us some of the conditions and some of the ones that come to your mind in terms of at your practice.
I don't see a surgical patient without using it now. I probably have a dozen ACL patients right now post-op of all different levels and even some newer procedures with the bear. And every single one of them, day one, I start with ARP and have had just incredible success with them, decreasing their swelling, walking. I currently have one baseball player with an ACL. He's 10 days and he was walking at 7 days without a limp, and he's never lost his quad. Like he didn't shrivel up into nothing. And so it just makes your rehab that much easier. It makes my job easier. It makes me look like I'm a better therapist.
Yeah, there you go.
So, but there's a really special ACL that she tore her ACL in college playing soccer, was rehabbed at her, Power 5 college, and she was right on track. And when she started running, she started developing some knee pain, and they thought there was some other stuff going on, and went in and did another surgery on her. And then she couldn't run. She could barely walk. Her parents asked me to see her over the summer, and they gave me 2 weeks to see if I could do anything. And their goal wasn't even for her to go back and play soccer for her senior year. Her goal was just that she'd be a normal girl and be able to walk and, have a life and not be in constant pain. And so I recommended that we do the ARP with her, the ARPneuro as a treatment if that's all I had was 2 weeks. And so we did some manual work, but we did all of her strengthening with the ARPneuro, and I had 6 visits, and she left, and her mom was like, well, she's not in pain anymore. She's walking. And then she was running, and then she went back to school and she started training, and she got to have some minutes in like the last few. She got cleared to play in October. of this fall, and she got to experience the last, month of soccer season for herself and play in her senior day. And
wow.
So that was a big,
that's a
big
great
moment with it, right? That just shows you the power that, I think if we'd had longer, we could have maybe gotten her back sooner, but because we only had 2 weeks with 6 visits, it was a major milestone for her.
For sure.
That's a great story. Yeah. So do you use the RX for surgery at all? Because I know we've got a lot of clinics that are now starting, if they have a patient that's going in for surgery, ACL or any kind of surgery, which, I think love to try to avoid, but sometimes it's inevitable that you have to go under the knife. But we have a lot of clinics now using it pre-surgery so they can strengthen, so it helps the recovery.
Yeah. I use it on all patients. I don't just use it on surgical patients, but I just don't really treat a surgical patient without it any longer, because there's so many neurological issues that come from having surgery and having those injuries. But I do it pre, for the rehab. I do it for, it's not always my first thing to go to with back patients. I do if they're in a lot of pain and they can't move. Like, it's kind of that like gateway to get them to be able to move. I do it a lot to keep people strengthening and moving more than I would say that I do it just as I don't use it as like a pain modality as much.
Okay.
But yeah, pre-op, if I do see any of them, we do that for them. I did it pre-op for a rotator cuff tear, to get him some strength before he went in for his shoulder surgery recently. Injuries, I try to get him back moving. Personally, in August, I was surfing a bunch with my kids before they left for college, and probably surfed a little too long and tweaked my knee and tore my meniscus and bruised the bone pretty bad. And they were leaving in a week, didn't want to get out of the water. So they came in, and I actually put the PRS on it all night. And then the next day I came into my clinic and did the RX on it and was able to squat and get it moving. And I didn't take all the pain away because of the bone bruising, but as long as I was treating it with it, I went back to surfing within 3 days and was able to maintain it and get through it. And 4 weeks later, I was fine. So I do think that it has like multiple uses, but there's so many neurological things that happen when we get hurt that we as PTs or massage therapists or chiropractors or any of that, we can't really address. And that's the continuing lagging thing for people with injuries, is that neurological feedback. And so the faster you can change that neurological input to the system, I feel like the better they are, the faster they can get back to activities they want to do.
Yeah, that's a great analogy. Go ahead, Jake. It sounds like you.
Yeah. So Cari, we had a question come in on the rotator cuff when you mentioned that on the strengthening exercises. What were some of the pad placements you used for that?
So for the rotator cuff, for this gentleman, I used the upper trap, and then I used like the back of the shoulder, like around the teres. So like, in the back placement there.
Okay.
And then we did some rotator cuff strengthening and some wall Ys, because when he would come in, he wasn't even able to lift his arm. And so, and he was waiting results of the MRI, and we were pretty sure he had a tear.
And I kind of have a follow-up question with that, because I know how shoulders can be with this technology. How soon did you see that range increase?
5 minutes.
Yeah, it's unbelievable, isn't it?
It is unbelievable.
Yeah.
The same thing is with the squat. Like, you can put it on and their squat looks wonky. It's a little shifted. It's not the prettiest thing in the world. And then, 5 reps, 6 reps, maybe the second set, all of a sudden they're like, hey, this feels really good, and they even notice that it's not the normal squat that they had.
Yeah. And they're asking to show on the model. So if you don't mind, I'm gonna move this over really quick.
Absolutely.
And so you said on upper traps, was it the black pad?
I put the black pad on the upper trap.
Okay, so let's represent it as the black pad.
Yeah.
So about right
and then
there.
Yep. And then I put on the like Terry's minor area.
So like in this position right there, like
Yep.
this. Okay.
Exactly.
So if you guys can see that, so it's black here and then the red here, and then you just mirrored everything to the other side.
Yes, I did.
Okay, perfect. Yeah. So I hope that helps a little bit.
That's great.
And whoever made the suggestion to make one black and then the other one eventually, I think I was going to use red, but I felt like that blended in. But that was a great suggestion, so you guys can see that.
Yeah,
so
good stuff. Yeah, we're getting so many good suggestions. That's that's great. Well, so what? Give us a few other just off the top of your head, some other conditions that when you get a new patient walking in with X, you know exactly, okay, this is right in my wheelhouse for utilizing the ARPneuro.
A couple of the things is like how active they are. Like, those people that are like, they're going to go ride their bike, surf, kayak, run, no matter what you tell them. It is their life. They're not going to give it up. Those people instantaneously, or they're like, how fast until I can do this? Like, I've got this timeline, or, hey, I know I'm injured. It's this, I'm still going to compete. Like, what do I have to do to compete? So those are those ones. Absolutely 100%. I'm going to suggest using the ARPneuro on them.
So Matt, does that personality ring true to somebody that you know?
I don't know anybody like that, to be honest. As a matter of fact, now, Cari, it's coming back to me, our conversation, and it had to be 6 months ago, but now it's coming back because of our mutual friends, Rock.
Yes.
Pure, right? So yeah, now I kind of remember that they're a little type A. I don't you what you say?
All of us are though. It's like I couldn't go more than 3 days without getting in the water. So
yeah, Rock is a professional triathlete, or was still a coach, I'm assuming.
Yes,
and his wife, she won Hawaii Ironman. I don't remember. I know it was for sure once, maybe a couple times, but they were just great people. So if you see them, tell them I said hello.
And I will. And we are in the middle of like triathlon world here.
Yeah.
Biking, triathlon. Everybody does something here. So, so those are the people I would do. The other people that I do go to is, a group that probably doesn't get talked a lot about is a geriatric population that still wants to do things, but their bodies just aren't healing as fast as they want them to. And they have all these compensations, and they have disc issues, and they have all these back issues, and they've tried everything, and they don't want to do surgeries. And that's the only thing. And I had a woman like that with really bad stenosis. And I was a little worried because, the ARP is amazing. It's just not the most comfortable to start with. And it's not really pain. It's just not anything you've ever really felt. And so some people, you're just not sure how they'll tolerate it. Mm-hmm. So I recommended it to her. She's 84, but still works and does all her stuff and exercises. And she couldn't sleep. She couldn't stand up. She couldn't walk her dog. She was terrible. So I was like, well, let's try it. So I put the pads on her in our back and like in through her glutes. And then we just did some sit to stand stuff off of a chair and just did neuro reset. I was kind of like worried about what to do with her with it. And she thought it was the best thing since sliced bread. Like she slept that night for the first time. So those people that have tried everything is another one. And I think that's where I do more of the seeking with like the pad and try to figure out maybe it's not what everybody's thinking, that the compensation is coming from something else, or the dysfunction is coming from something that we're not looking at, that we're looking at pathology on a MRI or something like that. And maybe that's not really what it is or all boiled down to. So that's a group of people I use it with as well.
Yeah, that's a great, I think the scanning portion, we've got so much data and kind of on the studies and the protocols, but inevitably, if it's not working, there's some other compensation, or there's, the scanning feature of what this technology is. Jake, I'd love for you to, kind of talk a little bit about how the scanning works. And, from that point, it is amazing for just the re-education and remotivation of some of the tissue that's been fired up in that example is great. But for those that don't know what that means, the scanning, can you talk a little bit about that, Jake?
Sure. Yeah. And as far as like how it works, there's a couple of theories. And I think the more we get to learn, the more we realize we might've been not as correct the first time, and we're getting closer to it. But essentially what she's talking about is you're going over with a clamshell pad, a sponge, and it goes over certain areas. In some cases, you just feel the regular pins and needles or the contractions, no problem. And then it'll go over a certain area, and we call it a hot spot. We used to say it'll light you up like a Christmas tree, and we would consider something like that, the area that we would anchor a pad. And essentially our hypothesis behind that is that, because it's contracting at 500 times a second, that particular muscle isn't able to absorb that type of force. And you're not really able to detect that when you're just going normally, when your brain contracts a muscle around 20 times per second. But when something at 500 times per second starts to blow out that area, it reacts differently. And again, like Cari said, it's not pain, but it's certainly intense. And it pulls out some of those locations where you're like, okay, now we'll anchor the pad here and here and see what happens. And a lot of times it's not even in the close proximity of where the pain is.
Yeah, that's great. That's a great description. So,
yeah, it's nothing that we have as an ability to do. Like I've put it on people's ankles when it's their backs, it's like, it's really is you think it's going to be their back,
Right.
If it's a back patient, and you scan their entire back and they're like, well, this is where it hurts. I'm like, well, that's not where the problem is. Like, like this is what's lighting up. So let's try that and see how it works.
And it's interesting, isn't it, Cari, when you see their reaction afterwards, where it's like, you didn't even treat my back, but essentially afterwards they're out of pain. So it's like you treated the back, but it wasn't the back that was the problem. It was something else.
Yeah. And that's what I tell people is like, it's that neurological input that's causing you to change how you move. Right. And that's what we're trying to fix is how you move. Like, I'm not going to change somebody's disc disease, and I'm not going to repair somebody's ACL or whatever it is, but we're going to change how you move so that you're not creating all those muscular contractions in an improper manner or in imprecise manner or a sequencing issue, whatever it may be.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think a great example of that is, and I think like an ACL is a perfect example. If somebody blows out their ACL, there's probably some muscle or something that's not firing properly to protect that ACL. And so, you might go through surgery, but if you don't get to that origin of issue, right, then, there's a pretty good chance that ACL is not going to, you might have issues with that ACL regardless of the surgery, unless you go after that origin of what isn't firing. So it's just interesting technology. It's funny because I had a shoulder issue, and when I got treated, the hot spot was my shin.
Yeah.
And to your point, I laughed when I'm hearing the explanation. You're like, well, wait a minute, it's my shoulder. What are you doing around my shin with that hot spot? And sure enough, it's the way neurologically things, are transferred through, throughout the body. So it's amazing how this stuff works. But so now, so you're introduced to this technology, and now it becomes a family game. So
it is a family game.
Tell us about your kids and how it sounds like they're very active, and tell us, how involved they are now with this technology.
They're both pretty involved with it. My daughter more than my son. They're both college athletes.
Okay.
My daughter tore her ACL in the spring of her freshman year.
Okay. And what sport does she play, and where does she play?
She is a softball player for Ohio State University.
Okay. Nice. All right, good.
And she hurt her knee in a Big Ten game.
Okay.
And during the Big Ten tournament, and everybody told her she was just hyperextended it. And then she, continued to play on it throughout the rest of the tournament. And then it gave away with her in one of the games, but she continued to play on it. And then they tested it and they thought she was okay. And so they went on and she continued to play through the NCAA tournament. And then she was still having a lot of pain. And, but she didn't have any really instability. So they re-looked at her, decided to do some imaging, but she was coming home. So we did the imaging at home. And by the time she got the results of the imaging, she was already surfing and, running and practicing. And we were a little shocked to see that her ACL was completely torn and she had some massive bone bruises. And we started doing the ARP on her right away that summer, and took a little bit to get in with one of the couple surgeons here, and they felt like she was pretty stable, and they recommended that we just continue doing what we were doing and not do surgery. So she continued with the ARP all summer training and doing a rehab program here in our clinic. And then she went back to Ohio State and had to get cleared by the doctor. And he thought that she was pretty stable and that her reactivity of her muscles was right on target and cleared her to play. And she's never worn a brace, and we're going to knock on wood, but she uses the PRS. She went back to school with PRS. She uses it for her knee. She used it a lot her first year for her knee with her training and stuff. Now it's more of every time she does something to hurt herself, she uses it. She fouls ball off her ankle or something and it swells up, she'll use it, or overtrains, she uses it. Traveling, she uses it because they travel so much. So it's just become a part of her training protocol and a recovery protocol.
Nice. Hopefully she's monetized that with all her teammates, because I'm sure that the magic bullet that she has is being asked for by all her.
Yeah, it's one of those things of like it's hard to get people to try new things sometimes, and it's hard to get people to understand that the PRS is not a TENS unit or not these other devices. Like what it does is, significant. And so trying new technology is challenging, but once you get people to try it, then they really do fall in love with it.
Yeah, for sure. And as our slogan says, it's all about the outcomes, right?
Yeah.
Because if you really are looking to get healed, right, and you've tried, whatever, and you're going to do whatever it takes, especially in your community with all these active type A's. If you want to move and you're having issues, this is such a great technology to try.
Yeah.
And because it's such a high, likelihood of the success. I mean,
the how fast it works on somebody is pretty amazing. I had a gentleman that had a hip surgery, and we used it on his hip, and he couldn't step up. Stairs was difficult, right? Even a small 4-inch step was on that leg was almost impossible. So we did the ARP on him, and within that session, he was able to do those step ups.
It's amazing how, especially it is amazing. I think I've shared this story before, but I had a friend, come and stay with me, and he, thought he was a kid playing hoops with his kid and messed up his knee. And we were supposed to golf 3 days in a row. And he says, I might have to take a cart. I don't think I can walk my knee. I put him on the PRS, 20 minutes, blood flow for another, 45. He woke up the next day. He immediately went online, bought a PRS, swears by it, because, he could not believe that in one treatment, what it did. And we've seen it all the time. It's remarkable. And then, I always say, to your point, it sounds like you're very good at the scanning, that after 4 to 6 sessions, if you're not seeing, incredible results, then it's time to kind of go, okay, there's something else going on, and then we can scan.
And I tend to rescan Like if I'm doing it on somebody for a longer period of time, I tend to rescan, you know, when I see like plateaus, you know, it's like, oh, okay, well, evidently we've dealt with what that is.
For sure.
Yeah.
You know,
Cari,
the other way I've used it is for performance, like mechanics, like athletes' mechanics and throwing and things like that, you know, where their arm action is a little delayed or they've got too much shoulder shrug going as they throw or things like that. And we've done that and done drills with it to improve and change what their mechanics were when they were throwing.
I was going to ask you that with all the athletes, if you did use it for performance as well. So that's good to hear. And we also have a question that came in by Chandler, a couple of questions here. And one of them, it was something we talked about 5 minutes ago. Would you do a certain set of reps with that pad placement and then do the same reps again, but switching red and black leads? Probably talking about when we're doing traps.
The shoulder one, yeah. So I usually do, like, depends on who it is, but I usually do 3 or 4 exercises. You know, it depends on how long it takes them to do, but we're usually doing 3 sets of like between 8 and 12 because I'm trying to move things versus like technically strengthen at most of the phases. In the beginning, I would probably be doing 2-3 sets of 10 with them, and I would not be switching the pads. Like when I usually always keep the black where the black is and the red is where the red is. I don't ever switch them. I do the reverse on it with the in the clinic, but not always. I usually start people and I'll do like maybe 1 or 2 of the sessions with the reset where you're kind of ramping up and down. But then I just shift into training with it on and use like a 20-minute training protocol on them. Oops, my lights are going out. Hang on. So sorry.
I think
bedtime.
I love it. You're on a timer.
That's funny.
It's time to go home.
No, it was like nobody's moved in here. They're like,
oh, I gotcha.
No, you gotta go off if people don't move.
All right. Funny. Well, if we need to do jumping jacks, we can collectively do it. But
definitely,
you know, I'd love to. You touched upon a point that I love, Jake. I mean, I learned something myself at the MLB winter meetings and how a lot of the training and the utilization of the RX is that slow kind of motion, you know, to improve compensation as a pitcher, as a thrower. I never asked you this, Jake, but I'd love to hear from both of you on why and how is that slow motion utilization of the RX on a throwing motion, as an example. Why is that so beneficial?
Yeah. So, and what he's referring to, Cari, is there was a video that we shared where there was a pitcher slowed down his entire form and just did 1 rep of a pitch. And the idea behind it was to make it actually a perfect form within that pitch and to kind of detect if there was any compensations within that pitch to correct it in the process. And as you're doing that, you're increasing output power. So you're putting force on that. And, you know, again, being the type of wave it is, you're also retraining it. So you're essentially training that pitcher to pitch more efficiently and fire up their muscles properly. So that is a good form of a pitch, and you're not compensating and causing injury.
Okay.
Yeah, and I do that with like throwing mechanics when they're off, even like position players. Mm-hmm. If they're struggling through that, I've used the RX on them and used it like especially like in through their upper trap, I find. And we'll do drills and we'll do super slow drills with them so they can feel it, right? It's giving them a chance to feel what their bodies are. These athletes like know what everything's supposed to feel like. And so if you slow it down, it allows them to feel each position a little bit.
Okay.
And start to control each of those positions. And that's how they learn. You know, you see batters like take some really slow swings on the side, like when they're warming up. It's the same thing of like feeling different things that they want to be able to feel. So you can slow their motion down that they feel and hit these milestones along that process of movement. And then having the RX on, it just intensifies it so that they can feel.
Interesting. Okay.
The upper trap with the baseball players seems to be a big one. They all kind of have this like shrugging motion. It doesn't, I have a feel that it makes the upper trap and they have to fight the motion, right? They have to fight the shoulder coming up when they've got it. So it facilitates almost them having some scapular depression during those throwing mechanics.
Good.
Kind of a follow-up question, Chandler as well, and we've got a few others.
Okay.
Would you use the sleep feature for your hotspots? Interesting question.
I usually use it around the hot spots or around the pain area a lot for the sleep feature. But I don't see why you couldn't use it on the hot spots.
Right. Yeah. Blood flow in that area. That's essentially what you're trying to generate. So, and then another one, kind of going off the hip, were you talking about that? Where are you placing the pads on the hip?
The hip is one that I always search on because it's such a weird area for people. Like a lot of times the pad placement goes right on the very front of the hip, kind of just below the crease of the hip. And then I find that the lower part of the quads is another big one. Some people, it's the front of the hip and then on the side of the glutes, on the side of the hip, or even on the very back of the glutes. And then sometimes it's the adductors too, like the inner thigh. So, I mean, that's where like having someone search it for you, it helps you get those placements. If you don't and you just have the PRS, then I would say a safe bet always is the front of the hip and the side of the hip, or the front of the hip and the lower part of the quads.
So when you say front of the hip, are you talking like TFL area?
I'm talking like rectus femoris, like right, like, you know,
Okay.
the hip flexor right there below the ASIS, right in the front.
Okay. So
could you show us on our friend over there? Because those are a lot of big words that, you know.
Yeah. I was trying not to use the big words.
I know, but I like big words because I mean,
I'd go higher.
Go higher than that. So almost like that by the hip flexor here.
Yeah, like just below the ASIS.
Okay. So
No, and up more like, yeah.
Right there.
Yeah.
And then you said the red would be lower down by the quad?
Some people it's the quad, yeah.
And are you going vertically or are you going horizontally where you're covering like, okay. Yeah, so you're covering the VMO and VL.
Yeah.
Okay. So something like that placement.
That's one placement. And then the other one I think is super common is the red would be on your glute medius.
Okay. So we'll flip that around here.
Yep.
And then you would just keep it here on the black?
Yep. Yes.
Yeah, I do this one a lot actually. Yeah, that's a good one.
Yeah, it just depends. Like, I mean, I've kind of figured out from searching so many different ones. Everybody's does have some different ones, but I mean, I have one that had some hip pain and they told him he had a surgery and he didn't want to have surgery. His was purely on like the glutes, which I don't find very often. And he called it making his butt do the bongos.
I love it.
Butt bongos, that's great.
And he actually bought one. He was distraught, came over like from Hawaii for me to look at him, and he was distraught thinking he was going to have hip surgery and give up all of his sports. And I said, well, let's try this. And he fell in love with it. And he was like, rode the next day, went mountain biking, didn't have any hip pain for the first time in months. So
that's awesome.
How do you integrate? Do you integrate the PRS with your patients and clients, or how do you integrate that with your?
We use the PRS in the clinic even.
Okay.
So mostly I use the RX, but there's a few people like doing some strengthening where I can't get their quads to do what I want, or I can't get like their shoulder to do what I want, and I'll use the PRS on them in the clinic.
Okay.
Okay, so Cari, you mentioned on the performance. Do you adjust some of the pulse frequency on that, or do you predominantly stay at 500 pulses?
I predominantly stay at the 500. I've played with the pulses and brought them down. And if I want to strengthen more, I will definitely pull the pulses down. Like if I'm going to put some weights in their hands and I'm going to go more strength training with them, I'll pull the pulses down. But I find that the high frequency, we just can't beat it. And that seems to be more the performance stuff.
Yeah, especially when you're talking about the movement.
Could you explain that, for those that may not understand what that means in terms of the pulse versus the contractions?
Yeah, I always compare it to almost like a fire hose. So 500 is definitely, and you know, Cari's on point with that. It covers more territory. So if it's a fire hose and it's covering your body, it's literally, it can literally go head to toe regardless of where you place the pads, especially if you get high enough. So for movement and being able to, you know, pull out like inconsistencies with somebody's form, 500 really, you can't beat it. 40, you're zeroing that in. So you're essentially taking that fire hose and you're pinpointing certain areas. So if you see something that might be struggling, maybe it's not firing up or glute med's not activating, you anchor a pad there and it's literally going to focus in that general area. Or even specifically for strength, I've used this for bodybuilders and powerlifters where you're focusing on areas and just lightening the weight. And this could actually focus on that specific point rather than going through the entire body. So they both have their benefits, but 500 definitely would be more for the movement performance side. 40 more of the strength hypertrophy.
Okay.
Yeah. And like there's a few post-ops that I've used, like lowered it down because they're just not getting, you know, their muscle growth back very much. But I find that they respond better to the 500, the high frequency.
Yeah.
So being in that triathlon mecca of the U.S., right, and having all those tri geeks around, what are some of their? Do they come in? First of all, do you have many triathletes that come in?
I have a handful. Like it's never been really my specialty. Like they kind of had another therapist they partnered with, but I work with a handful of them.
Yeah.
And they have everything wrong with them. You
Yeah,
know, it's like
when you're swimming 2.5 miles and biking 112 in a marathon, and that's just common 30 hours a week of training. You know, that's why it leads me to my question on the foot bath, right? I mean, because that pounding. How often do you use the foot bath for any patients?
I honestly don't use it that much, and I don't know why. Mm-hmm. It's one of those things that I keep thinking I'm going to use more often, or I'm going to try again.
Yeah.
One, people get nervous putting their feet in water with electricity.
Right.
You know, you kind of have to sell that one a little bit. And two is I've actually started using the pads on the palm of the hand and the bottom of the feet a lot.
Okay.
I have several gymnasts I use that get a lot of wrist pain. Mm-hmm. Even baseball players, I find like their hands are a huge part of it. And instead of putting their hands in the water, I end up doing pads so that they can move. Because I really like the movement part with it.
Okay.
Rather than just being static. So
yeah,
I think that's why I don't use the foot bath as much.
Yeah, good.
But I am going to try it. I have a patient with some neuropathy that I wanted to try it with.
Okay.
Another question came in here. What do you suggest for tennis elbow? Have you treated that? Have you used the device with this?
Yeah, the tennis elbow is another one. I've used it with tennis elbow, with baseball players with medial elbow pain. And all is really different, but I tend to go to the hand placement in the palm of the hand, and then usually like right below the elbow or above.
Okay.
And then have them do a lot of hand opening and rotations.
This would also be a case where not just foot bath, maybe hand bath. We've found a lot of success with that on hand bath too. And you can still do some of those movements in the water as well, as long as it's wrapped properly.
Yeah.
So it sounds like you've been using this technology, since 2020 or so. So you're
probably 2021 is when I actually got it. It took him a little bit to convince me. I wish I'd started it sooner.
Yeah, that's good. I mean, I'm still amazed. There's so many clinics, PT clinics. There's so many chiropractic offices on there. I'm still amazed at, I mean, like you have your way, you have your strategy of how you help your patients. From your opinion, now kind of somebody that's adapted this into their practice, what do you think is holding other clinics back, or other PT or chiropractors from trying this technology after knowing, how successful it is?
I mean, I think there's always, like, new technology is always cost prohibitive to some clinics, right? Worrying about, unfortunately, we have to think about how we're going to make money as well as just make people better. Right. And so I think that's one, is always something you can't not think about. The other is, our medical community is really into being scientific, and that's a great thing. And we do want, to have a good understanding of everything. The human body and is always a tricky one to test, because you can't isolate, and you could have 50 ACLs or 50 shoulders or 50 backs, and the way they all got there are different. So how they respond to a technology doesn't always show well in a research type setting. So I think not having research takes some people out of it. I think they want very much evidence-based practices. And if it doesn't fit any of their evidence-based practices, they don't use it. I remember when I was a pretty new therapist, I took a course by Brian Mulligan, who's a New Zealand therapist that developed a technique called nags and snags and mobilization with movements. And somebody asked him his theory of, like, why his techniques work. And he was like, I'm not going to tell you. And we were like, why? And he's like, well, there's a lot of people that are smarter than I am, and they will tear my theory apart. He goes, and they'll throw my techniques out, and my techniques work. I just was probably not right in how I described them. So I think, that's a good thing for us to always remember, is we're evolving and our knowledge of the body's evolving. And when we were all new therapists, like, we went into orthopedics because we didn't like neuro, but now we all do neuro and realize that that's what drives everything. And I know more about neuro now than I did when I graduated and ever thought I would work with. And I mean, everything to me is about how to change the nervous system, not the pieces of the body.
That makes a lot of sense. That's a great description of the adaptation of just making, and again, making sure the outcomes are there. And I had one clinic basically say, and I don't, you guys can, I'd love to get your input on this, but it's like the aspirin, he said. I said, what do you mean by the aspirin? He says, well, technically, nobody really knows why it works. We just know it works.
Yeah.
And I thought, that's brilliant, because first of all, I don't know what aspirin's supposed to do or not do, but from a medical perspective, they just know it's been proven over outcomes that it works. So
and I mean, that's kind of the way I am with what I choose to use. And, when I saw it work on, like, those kids that were in here and how excited they were for it, I realized that was really something. I mean, they're not going to jump on something that didn't give them any benefit, or was just so. They all felt something from it and were excited and saw what it could do to benefit them.
Sure. That makes sense.
That's ultimately, like, these guys, they want to compete. Like, that's what's going to help them. And that's what I've seen in the clinic. And the more I use it, the more I'm amazed by it, and the more I want to use it, and the more I see it. And so I think you just have to be open to realize that as much as we think we know, and as much as we do know, we're still learning.
Yeah.
About what makes the body tick.
For sure.
One last question came up here, Susan. Any suggestions that you would do on your treatments for proximal fractured coccyx?
Ouch.
Oh, yeah, I was just thinking that too.
I would probably just start on either side of the SI joints in the glutes and just do blood flow is where I'd probably start.
Yeah.
And then
Jake,
once
would you mind describing what that means? What is that?
What? Oh, so on either side, the coccyx is like the tailbone.
Okay.
And so she broke the upper part of the tailbone. So the part you sit on, which makes it extremely uncomfortable.
Mm-hmm.
And it doesn't, I mean, it just is a slow healer.
Okay. So it's a blood flow. It's as much blood flow game as possible.
Yeah. I mean, I would put the PRS on them. I'd have them sleep in the PRS on the blood flow. I'd have them have that on as much as they can to help with that healing.
Yeah, that's a rough one.
Yeah.
Blood flow is a game changer, though, to be able to have that kind of at your fingertips that you can actually run it all day, too.
Yeah, I mean, everything is about blood flow and lymph flow and movement of fluid. I mean, that's what's going to make your tissue much healthier. Even if you work out, you're creating some inflammatory responses. That's what your muscle soreness is. And so the less stiffness you have, the less soreness you have, the better you move. So, I mean, that's the beauty of the PRS. Like I can have people work out in the clinic, and instead of them being sore for a couple of days, well, then they can start moving again.
Awesome.
That's great. So, and we're getting close to the end here, but so if people want to go and move to paradise where you live, how do they find you? How can they get in touch with you?
They can get us to touch with me through our website at Peak Performance, right? Which you can see on the screen there. I have an Instagram account that they can get a hold of me personally. If they want to get a hold of me personally, DM me, and we can take care of them or help them find their goals.
Okay, good. Awesome. Gosh, this is a great interview.
Yeah, Cari, thanks for joining in.
Oh, thanks for your time.
Yes, and we're glad you got the lights back on, because that
I know. It's like
my room here is dark again because I'm supposed to have somebody set up my studio, but that's
it's past your bedtime anyway.
It's getting there, that's for sure. But anyways, but thank you so much, Jake. I don't know if I'm sure there's more questions, but we've kind of run out of time. But we can't thank you enough for spending this time with us, and very informative for sure.
My pleasure. Thanks. I'm super happy I get to use the machine.
Awesome. Thanks
Absolutely.
again.
Keep up the good work, Cari.
All right. Thank you. Have a good night.
Thanks a lot, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye.